Y'all ready to blaze away or what?
When the Season 2 disaster first hit, the developers were scratching their heads trying to figure out where it all went wrong. They immediately started to try to fix things with the players, with putting out apologies, making promises, and talking about how they wanted to make the game better. Now, what they then did immediately after that was starting to introduce the idea of emergency patches. But all of those updates were really minor, and players was really looking for the game to be fixed. They were bragging about how they were going to do 1,500 changes to this game, and at the time it sounded great, but with their idea of what they wanted the game to be being so different from what the players wanted it to be, it just was a very bad update. And with about 2 months of chaos now, the players are really losing hope, and these emergency patches are the only things that's keeping their spirits a little bit high. And when you look at the Steam charts, this is exactly what you see. You see 5 to 6,000 people online. It's up a little bit from that low 5,000 number that we were seeing, but it is not anywhere near where Season 1 was, with the average being about 8 to 9,000. The update that they're planning next week not only needs to go very well, but I also think it needs to bring a very meaningful change to the whole entire game. Because even if you look at the update that they did on May 13th, even though that patch was received pretty positive, it still was critiqued because it didn't tackle enough. This June update will be the next big step for Tekken, and hopefully in the right direction. When you look at some of the things that the developers have said and some of the things that they're planning to do, this is where it gets pretty interesting. On the cosmetic side, you have new classic outfits returning. Something that I've been requesting for a very long time is Dragunov Tekken 5 outfit, and I think its time has kind of passed because everyone dropped the character and they're moving on to stronger characters, other characters. But then you also have the Bears as well, who I think had some of the best alternate outfits in Tekken 7, and it is good to see that they're making a return in Tekken 8. You also have the costume colors for Kuma and Panda, which is on the free side, and then of course the Karate Kid Legends collaboration. This is something that players aren't too excited about, especially when you have Street Fighter doing Overwatch and Monster Hunters. This in comparison is nothing. But when you talk about the real important parts of this update, of course, it's about balance. It says future adjustments. The next update, version 0.21, is scheduled to release in mid-May, and this will be focusing on aerial combo damage and also the revision of heat bursts. One of my criticisms of that update is that they didn't really attack what I believe to be the issue of combos, and that's tail spins. Tail spins pretty much unanimously is considered to be what is ruining combos. We've seen what it did with Yoshimitsu in Season 1. Yes, they nerfed his damage, but his combo still going forever. So now you're just getting hit with a low damage combo that still lasts like 15 seconds. And then for the other characters, it's a high damage combo that lasts 15 seconds. So they really have to take a look at that again, and that's something that I'm expecting with this update. But then also heat burst and the heat performance. This is something that they really attacked with that update. But of course, heat is a very powerful mechanic, and I think there's other things that they can try to address, because there even is examples of heat burst still tracking characters. But they go on to say, after the mid-May update, we will continue to work improving the performance of each character in situations where one-sided games tends to occur based on opinions and feedback. Now, this is the interesting thing, right? Because this is the story of Tekken 8. I mean, if you watch Combo Breaker and you saw Atif play, it was a very one-sided game. Atif was playing Anna perfectly. And what that means is he was doing stance mix-ups, stance pressures, and your only option was to guess. What I think is so interesting about this game is, like, when you're at the high level and you know when to sidestep, you know when to interrupt, you have some kind of options there, right? We've seen players fight against Atif and win. We know it's possible. But when you don't have all of that knowledge of when to sidestep, when to poke, when to interrupt, you're basically just have to guess on everything. When to move, when to do this, when to do that. And sometimes you have to guess even when you can block, because opponents will chip you, they will guard break you. The game is very chaotic, and I think that is the number one issue when you talk about what is being done in terms of neutral. Tekken plus 8 on block must come to an end in this June update. And when you talk about the character performance side of it, this is something that's really interesting as well, and your perspective on this may vary depending on what character you're playing. Like, for example, if you are a Lee main, if you're a Law main, this is your number one priority. But if you're a Yoshimitsu, this really isn't on the top of your list. If you're a King main, this isn't really on the top of your list. We do have a tweet here from Harada where he said that the balancing team is working to fix Lee, and he didn't give a specific date or a time. But when you talk about this being one of the #1 driving factors of season 2 as well, I think this should be something that they really nail in this next update so they can show players that they're serious about fixing the game, because a lot of people see these emergency patches as like kind of a nothing type update. But if they could just really show that they're serious about pushing this game in the right direction, I definitely think that will lift morale a lot. A very fascinating thing about Tekken 8 is how the developers constantly said throughout all of season 1 how they want to focus on the characters who lost identity. This is something that they said about Raven specifically and many characters. But then they continue down this path of removing identity and forcing everyone to be rushed down 50-50 aggressors. And when you talk about how all of these characters were given new moves that basically makes that a reality, how will they address that? We saw in the previous patch where they reverted some changes for Asuka and Leo, but those characters still remain very much a problem, and they're still really powerful. And a lot of it has to do with these new stances, these new situations, these new moves, and it's just creating a very unfair type of game. Now, we do have a release date for this update, and it is scheduled to release on June 3rd. From the previous patch notes, it says this update will include adjustments to certain character specific moves that consume the remaining heat timer duration, as well as balance improvements through the targeted character tweaks. Building on outcomes of the previous and current updates, we will continue our efforts to enhance the overall balance and ensure a more refined and competitive gameplay environment. The consumption of heat is something that is really interesting as well, because in season 2, they introduced this idea for some characters, not all, but you can gain more heat. And depending on which character you play, you may be able to effectively gain more heat better than some. We see some pros are calling for the removal of this or to give it to everyone, and then the same for installs as well. Either give installs to everyone or remove it for everyone, because these mechanics are so powerful. So when you talk about this next update also targeting heat timers, heat consumption, how will they balance the heat mechanic and the moves that are enhanced by it? This seems to be the #1 driving question for all of Tekken 8 so far. Where some problems they were able to squish, it seems like we always come back to heat and what characters are doing with it, in it, and how the game is just like really chaotic because of it. I think it's so interesting that how this mechanic was introduced to spice up the game, but years later it's just causing problems everywhere. As for this update, I think the developers will deliver on a lot. Going off the previous updates, they were definitely pushing the game in the right direction, but really with this update, it's just about how much of it they can fix, because gone are the days where the players are going to be okay with like a little baby nerf here, a little baby fix here. You know, players are really wanting this. They want to play. They want to play the game, but the game is unplayable. So they have to do serious work in this next update and really put the game back on track. With Fahkumram and Armor King's release, this game is going to have a third opportunity to reach some kind of success, but they have to make sure the game is playable leading up to that, and also when those characters do arrive. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.